Hello, welcome to Human Tech, a podcast about the intersection between brain science and humans and psychology and technology. Lots of stuff today. My name is Guthrie. I'm here with Susan.
Hey, Guthrie.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good.
Today's topic is about inducing compliance.
Inducing compliance.
Exactly. I had I wrote a blog post that has not yet been published, or maybe it has. I don't even remember. And it's all about inducing compliance. Did you want to say anything first, or?
Well, I guess we should say what we mean by inducing compliance.
So inducing compliance is basically I have a request, So if you take it at its basic form, compliance is I'm making a request of you, and you acquiesced. So how can I?
You made a request, and I granted the request.
Correct. So what can I do to, in theory, make this go a little smoother?
Yeah, it's funny. Compliance, I don't know, I think is kind of strong and has almost a negative connotation.
Yeah.
I'm going to force you.
Yeah, well,
to comply, right?
I think there's a part of that.
But that's the way. I mean, that you didn't make up that term compliance, right? I mean, that's used in the titles of the research articles, I think, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. So there's a paper by Cialdini. It's an older paper, but it's a fun one. Called "Reciprocal Concessions Procedure for Inducing Compliance: The Door in the Face Technique."
The door in the face technique.
That's what it's called. That's the name of the paper.
All right. Are you gonna explain it?
Yeah, sure. I could certainly explain it.
All right. Can we do like a role play?
Yes. Sure.
To demonstrate what they did in the experiment.
Sure.
Okay. I'll be the unwitting person on the street.
Okay.
And you'll be the experimenter.
Okay, so this is the first experiment then.
The first experiment.
Yeah.
You come up to me. I'm on the street. I'm walking down the street.
Yeah, and so I say, "Hi."
Hello.
I am work for an advocacy organization.
Oh, okay.
Hey, how about you come down to the local jail and do some work at the jail?
Do some work?
Yeah, for free at the jail.
You mean like volunteer or something?
Yeah.
Really? What would I have to do?
A bunch of stuff at the jail.
Oh, like for like an hour or?
For a while.
Oh, I don't know. I'm really busy. I don't think I could do that.
Okay. How about if you come and visit the zoo and like hang out at the zoo for a little bit, like this weekend sometime?
Do you just want me to go to the zoo?
Yeah.
Like just to hang out? Do I have to do anything?
I don't know.
How does that help your advocacy group?
I don't know. You're asking me all these. This is a role play. You're asking me questions that they did not say what the exact thing within the study was.
I think they did, but okay. I guess I could, I guess I could come hang out at the zoo.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is a terrible. That was really not a very good example.
That was terrible.
Oh my god.
Do you want to do it again?
No. Because, look, a lot of these conversations were minutes long. I don't know exactly what they said.
I think I have more of a description.
Yeah, okay, fine. But the point, really, the first experiment was that you're gonna make me pull up the original.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Okay, fine.
I'm going to make you work.
What does it matter what they said to the participants? Like the exact
Really? You don't think it matters? Because I think the wording of it
I don't
matters.
think it matters at all.
All right. Let's delay having you pull it up.
No, I'll pull it up. I'm just saying, like, the net effect is the bottom line is that they ask people to hang out at a jail and then hang out at the zoo. But okay, look, I have the original paper open.
Good. First study.
Uh-huh.
What did they say?
Okay. Would you like to run this again?
I would. Yeah.
Okay. Dude, let's run it again.
Okay.
Hi.
Hello.
I am a person who works with the County Youth Counseling Program.
Oh, okay.
We're currently recruiting university students to work as voluntary non-paid counselors at the County Juvenile Detention Center. The position could require 2 hours of your time per week for a minimum of 2 years. You would be working more in the line of a big brother sister to one of the boys or girls at the detention home. Would you be interested in considering for one of these positions?
So you're saying this is not paid, huh?
No.
In 2 years, I got to go down to the juvenile. I don't think I could commit to that.
Okay, that's fine. We're also recruiting university students to chaperone a group of boys and girls from the County Juvenile Detention Center on a trip to the zoo. Voluntary, non-paid, 2 hours of one afternoon or evening. Would you be interested in considering for one of those positions?
Oh. So I take him to the zoo for 2 hours one time?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
All right. Well,
Yeah,
okay.
that was useful,
so
I suppose.
that was useful. So why is that a big deal? I mean, of course, someone's going to say they're willing to, when comparing, I got to go for 2 hours a week for 2 years or something down to the juvenile detention center versus I got to go to the zoo one time for 2 hours. Of course, people are going to choose. They're going to say no to the first one and yes to the second one.
Yeah. So they had there were 3 conditions.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
There was the rejection moderation condition, the smaller request only control, and the exposure control.
Okay, so to explain what those 3 are.
Okay. So the rejection moderation condition was exactly what we just did.
Okay, so you gave me the first choice that was kind of big and horrible.
Which was the extreme request.
I say no.
And then they said, well, we also have another program you might be interested in, and then made the smaller request.
Okay. And I said yes. Yep, that was one condition.
The smaller request control is the same. So we can do the smaller request control really quickly. Okay, so I say hi.
Hi.
We have a trip to the zoo. You want to go to the zoo with the Boys and Girls Club. So it's just you don't ask the big one. It's just asking about the smaller one.
Well, it's not the Boys and Girls Club. It's the same
It's the same question that
juvenile, but you didn't ask me the big thing about going to the jail for 2 years.
Zoo.
Just the zoo part. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yep. That was condition number 2. Some people got that.
Yeah.
And what was the third one?
Third one is an exposure control. So
what does that mean?
They basically say, hey, okay, so here's the exposure control.
Yeah.
And I'll read it. We're currently recruiting university students for 2 different programs. In the first, we're looking for voluntary, unpaid counselors to work at the County Juvenile Detention Center. The position would require 2 hours of your time per week for a minimum of 2 years. You would be working more in line of a big brother sister to one of the boys or girls at the detention center. In the other program, we're looking for university students to chaperone a group of boys or girls from the detention center on a trip to the zoo. It would be voluntary, non-paid, and would require 2 hours of one afternoon or evening. Would you be interested in being considered for either of these two programs?
Okay, so all right, we have three conditions. One is you first ask them if they'll go do the big thing, and then when they say no, you ask them to do the little thing.
Mm-hmm.
The second condition is you just ask them to do the little thing.
Mm-hmm.
You never mention the big thing. And the third condition is you give both of them as an option at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's why it's an exposure control.
Okay.
So
tell me what happened.
No subject agreed to do the large favor. But that's not surprising. I mean, 2 hours a day for 2 years after just...
Yeah, so it was for the experimental purposes. They were purposely asking people to do things they figured no one would say yes
That's
to.
probably true, yeah.
All right, so no one agreed to do the big thing.
But their goal was not to get people to do the big thing. Their goal was to get people to do the small one.
Okay, the small thing. Okay.
Right? So, the exposure control, which is again the control.
That's the one where you give the two options at the same time?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what happened?
25% of the people, which fairly small sample sizes, but for experiment 1, it's fine. 25% agreed to do the small task.
So nobody agreed to do the big one, but 25% of the people agreed to do the small one when they were both given at the same time as alternatives.
Yes.
Okay. What's next?
So then there was the smaller request-only control.
Just asking people if they'd go to the zoo. How many people said yes to that?
That was about 17%. So
less.
So less, yeah, exactly.
They just came up and asked people to go to the zoo. Okay.
Yes, to see what the natural... Because there's going to be some people who are like, oh, that sounds like a great idea. I definitely want to do that.
Right. Some people who just are nice and would do it.
Right. And then the rejection moderation condition, where they asked for the big request first and then the small one.
When you said no, then they asked for the small one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Was 50-50.
50-50?
Mm-hmm. 50% compliance for the small request.
50%. So that's a lot.
That is a lot.
So that's wait a minute. What's 17 times 3? So that's almost 3 times the number than if you just walked up and asked someone.
Yes.
And it's twice as much as if you gave people the 2 alternatives.
Correct.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a big difference. All right.
Now,
so you said, yeah.
Now I will. Now, as a small caveat.
Yeah, caveat time.
Again, the sample sizes were pretty small. They had. They did about, a little under 100 people for each. Experiment, but they were.
And these were university students.
Yeah, university students. A while ago, but yeah, so there was about 100 students for each experiment. But the reason that I'm not worried about that at all, sometimes it was about 70 students. They ran it 3 different times, so the overall effect, consistent.
Oh, so they did it a lot.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So
and they were able to replicate.
Yes. So that's the.
So now, do you have another study?
Yeah. That was just experiment 1.
That was experiment 1. Okay.
So you want to talk about experiment 1 and why it's interesting
before we talk about the other experiments?
Yeah, sure. What is it about experiment 1 that you like?
Well, I mean, we know that in so many ways, and on a lot of your, I mean, I know that you've been working on this series of blog posts and you've been I guess you could call them blog posts, but you've been reviewing this gigantic body of research on behavioral science and behavioral economics. Yeah. God bless you. And you've been writing about them and creating some blog posts, and I know that you're creating videos on them and so on because I've been helping you edit them. And I think there's, several things in several different studies that all have to do with the idea that people, our decisions are often based on relative perceptions. We can't help but compare the size of something to the size of something else.
Right.
And this reminds me of that, right? So that when you're just thinking about one thing all isolated, you have a bias for or against it. But when it's compared with something else, that changes your perception and changes your decision. So that's what this kind of reminds me of. But the part that's interesting, though, is this idea of it's not just, when they compared the two, when they gave you a choice, that increased compliance from 17 to 25%. But when they first asked the big one and then the little one, that was the huge effect. So, and I know, I actually, I'm familiar with this study from years ago, and I've written about it, and it has to do with the idea of concession, right? So the idea behind it supposedly is that you turned me down, right?
Right.
You said no, and in some way I felt bad about that. And so when you asked me another question that was, definitely not as onerous, then I said yes. And so I think there's always been this idea, right, since the study about concession, about if you want people to do something, first ask them for something that's kind of big and they're going to say no.
Right.
And then when they say no, then come back and ask them for the smaller thing. And then they're more likely to say yes. So, but I have some questions about this.
Well, okay. You could.
Should I ask them now, or do you want to go into the other studies first?
I would maybe wait. And
okay, I'll wait.
We'll go into
because I have questions, and I want to talk about how this applies to in different situations and so on. All right, go ahead. You want to tell us about the next study?
So they wanted to, figure out some stuff. So
delve deeper.
Yeah, delve deeper, right? And so it is not enough that the target has been, I quote from the paper, that the target has been asked to comply with a larger than smaller request. The target must perceive the request for the smaller favor as a concession by the requester. So there is.
So it's not just big versus small.
Well, so that was the original thought. It's like, it's framing and like wrap it up, but that's not what they did. So here's
what happened?
Oh boy. Okay, so this one gets a little more complicated. Okay, so here's the procedure for experiment 2.
Mm-hmm.
A person was approached by 2 experimenters, one male and one female, which we'll call experimenter A and B.
Okay.
A initiated interaction by introducing themselves to the subject.
Okay.
At this point, a second male experimenter C,
all right,
who was an acquaintance of B, approached the group and engaged B in a conversation about an upcoming exam they would both be taking.
All right. So
imagine,
2 people.
So imagine 2 people walk up and say, "Oh, hey, can we ask?"
But
you
I
some
don't know.
questions?
I don't know that.
Yeah,
2
the
people.
participant doesn't know that there are 3 people in on this. So 2 people walk up and they go, "Oh, hey, hi, we want to talk to you about perhaps a volunteer thing." And so you stop, and then out of nowhere, this third person comes up and says, "Oh, hey, Frank, how you doing? Hey, are you ready for that big test on Friday?"
Starts talking to one of the experimenters.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, and then what happens?
So quote, "This procedure uniformly distracted the subject attention for a second."
Okay.
Right. So it was basically meant to be a distraction.
Distraction for a few seconds. Okay.
So So then there were 3 conditions, okay?
Yep.
All right?
I'm ready.
So the first was the rejection moderation condition that we had in experiment 1. So experimenter A asked for the extreme favor.
Okay.
After the subject refused to comply, they then made the smaller request.
Okay.
Specifically, they said, oh, well, I'm also with the Campus Volunteer Service Organization in another program that has nothing to do with the Juvenile Detention Center. It involves helping to chaperone a group of low-income children to a trip up to the zoo. We can't give you any money, but it would only involve about 2 hours of one afternoon or evening. Would you be willing to help with this?
Okay. So it's very, very similar, except
They changed the language a little bit
they changed the language a little.
to see
Okay.
if they could get a different result.
Okay.
Just to, see if it was maybe something about the language. It would just, yeah. So, okay, so that was the first one. They also had a 2 request control.
Okay. What's
Two requester control. So they give the extreme request.
Yeah.
And then experimenter A, who asked for the extreme request, thanks the person and walks away from the group.
Okay.
This leaves leaves experimenter C alone with the subject. Okay, so
the new guy.
So here, right, this is why it just gets complicated. So A and B approach the participant, and they're like, "Hey, we'd like you to volunteer for 2 years." And the participant says, "Oh, no, thank you." Oh, and right before they say that, the third person comes up and says, "Oh, hey, how about that test on Friday?"
Yeah, we had the
Oh,
distraction.
wow, okay. And then they're like, "Hey, do you want to do the 2-year thing?" And the person says no. And then A and B say, "All right, thanks," and they leave.
Yeah, they're
Leaving
gone.
C, the person who came up asking about the test, and the participant.
Okay.
At this point, C makes the smaller request.
Says, hey, speaking of
No,
volunteering.
that's not what they said. They said,
No?
quote,
what did they
"Excuse
say?
me. I couldn't help overhearing you say that you
Yeah.
would not be able to be a counselor to juvenile delinquents for 2 years."
Yeah. Yeah.
And if the subject had given a reason for refusing, experimenter C would
Right.
mention it.
Because you were too busy.
But maybe
or
you
whatever.
can help me. My name
Yeah.
is blank, and I'm with the Campus Volunteer Service Organization in a program that has nothing to do with the Juvenile Detention Center.
Yeah.
And then would make the same request.
Same
right?
request.
I'm organizing another involves a program that helps chaperone a group of low-income children to the zoo. Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to
Yeah.
help with this? Okay, so that's the most complicated one, and that's the 2 requester control. But what you get is you have the big request made by A and B, and then a third person swooping in, not part of the original group.
Yeah, so now it's an interesting question because before with the first experiment, the idea was because I said no to you.
Well, let's not get there. What they were trying to trying to do is see if it was a framing question. So, like, do you want to give a minute on what framing is
thing.
quickly?
No. But
No,
you're saying
no.
it
You
was
should
just
do it for people who are not
it
familiar
was-
with what framing is and why that might be the cause.
wow, I don't know if I can do that off the top of
Okay.
my head. You can probably do that better than I can.
So framing is simply just to say, "Hey, would you like to buy a diamond?" So some guy approaches you in the street. "Would you like to buy a diamond ring for $1,000?" And you say, "No, I wouldn't want to do that." It's like, "Oh, well, I have this pen for $1." And versus going up and saying, "Oh, I have a pen for $1. Do you want to buy it?" What framing is $1,000 is a lot, $1 is a little. After, being asked about a big request for like $1,000, buying something for $1 seems like a very small
Yeah, so it's not the idea of I'm turning anyone down. It's just the relative comparison.
So the classic example is you walk into a store and there are two coats. One coat is $150 of medium quality, and another coat is $100 of a little under medium quality. And you know, the 150 seems kind of expensive. The second the second store has the same medium coat for $150, but then an above medium coat for $450. So the 150 all of a sudden in the first example seems expensive, but in the second example the 150 seems like a great like a good deal
real
because of the frame of the framing that it's in. So it's a
the $400
exactly. So it's a classic way of changing perceptions about requests and about how much things cost and stuff. And so the theory in this would, you know, your instinct would go, well, you asked me about doing a 2-year, you know, versus
purely framing, purely comparison.
Exactly. So it could be, you know, hey, you know, there's a world in which a trip to the zoo is the big request, right? So the big request is, oh, do you want to take a trip to the zoo? Versus, oh, can you I need 5 minutes. Can you just like write down, you know, sign this petition, right? So the idea would be that people are saying yes after you give them the 2-year jail thing,
just because of
framing, right? So going to the zoo seems small compared to asking someone to volunteer for 2 years at a jail.
Okay, so we've explained framing, but why is that significant here?
Well, so that's what they were testing for. So,
because if you switch people...
So if it's just framing, then it shouldn't matter who, right? You framed them for the first big request. So then it shouldn't matter who is asking for the second smaller request because
it's still
they've
framed.
Been properly framed. Exactly.
All right, what happened?
Well, that was the 2 requester control.
Oh, we have another one?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. Who sits around thinking up these experiments?
Cialdini.
Yeah, Cialdini's famous for this stuff.
And so the last one is the smaller request-only control, which was the same as study 1.
Okay.
So basically,
2
A and
people
B
still
approach the person. A introduces
and
themselves,
just say, will you
and
go
B,
to the zoo?
C joins and engages being, oh, hey, how about that test?
Oh, they still do that.
And then A makes the smaller request, do you want to go to the zoo?
All right, I'm ready.
So,
what happened?
And just for those who are worried, they alternated between male and female and just, you know.
Thank you.
Just to make sure there wasn't like,
I was worried
weird
about
stuff about, I'm scared because I'm being approached by some weird guy or something. They that's why they had 2 of them and they alternated between them.
Okay, they alternated gender and all that stuff.
So what you ended up getting was the small request only control.
Just asking, hey, would you go to the zoo?
Was 31%. Higher than...
And wait a minute, and then the other one, it was 25.
17.
Oh, the other one, it was
17.
Right. Okay. Oh, so this is much higher.
Now, it could be a couple things. Again, that could just be the natural variance of people asking.
Or it could be 2 people.
It could have been the way they framed the question because they changed the wording.
They did change it,
And also, you remember, a third person came up and said something.
Yeah.
So it's possible that by a third person coming up and saying, oh, hey, how about the weather? And how about that test?
And distracting
But that also gives the person asking perhaps you can trust them a little more. Like, this isn't some...
Oh, because they really are
a person.
Somebody knows them. They're not some weird scammer guy.
Exactly.
Okay.
So,
all right. So 31%.
Yep, 31%. Right. But it also could just be the natural variation and the day of the week that they...
Although that's a lot. That's a big difference. But okay.
Well, not really, because if you're... that's the... I mean, it is, but that's like the difference between like... it's like 4 people saying yes versus 8 people saying yes. So it is big, but it's not huge.
All right. So yes. So that was 31%, just the small request.
So The next we have the rejection moderation condition, which was the same in experiment 1, where they ask the big request, and then the person says hi, and then they make the small request. Right?
Okay.
And that was 56%, which it was 50% in the one before, so
Yeah,
a little higher,
but very similar. Okay.
Next, you have the two requester control. So in the two requester control, in theory, it should be the same. If it is framing, right, you had
this is the different person
asks.
Doing the
Correct,
second ask.
correct.
Okay, I'm curious about this. Whatever.
So in theory, if it's just framing, it should...
If it's just framing, it should be about 50%.
And it was actually 10%.
What?
10%.
10%?
Yeah. So...
Wow.
Yeah, right, exactly.
That's different.
So I quote from the paper. It appears that the results of experiment 2 that the target's perception of concession to the requester is a crucial factor in producing compliance with the smaller request. Only when the extreme and smaller favors were asked by the same requester was compliance enhanced. This finding provides further evidence for a reciprocal concessions mediator of the rejection then moderation effect. It seems that our subjects increased the frequency of assent to the smaller request only in response to what could be interpreted as a concession behavior on the part of the requester. Such assent then would seem best viewed as reciprocal concession behavior.
So what do you... all right, so you tell me what you think the importance of this is.
Well, it's just really important that it's not framing. That's the important thing.
There's a tiny bit of framing, because otherwise it would have been 0.
No, that's wrong. In fact, it's actually negative. That's why the request only control was there. In the request only control, they only ask for the smaller favor. So that's the natural predisposition of people to say yes. So the fact that it's lower actually works against it. Like it's actually worse than if they just would have come up and just asked. That's why you do this. That's why you do all the controls. So
yeah, okay, all right. So it isn't just framing. It really is because I said no to you.
Well, there's experiment 3.
Oh my God, are you kidding? Okay, all right, let's do it. Then we have to talk about
the last one. Some of these
implication.
Also do 4, 5, 6.
Oh my God, thank goodness this is only 3. All right. Well, all right, tell us about number 3.
Well,
What
the data
happens to
of
number
experiment 1 and 2 are wholly consistent with the reciprocal concessions formulation, and an alternative explanation for these results is applicable as well. It may have been that the heightened compliance in our rejection moderation conditions was due to the fact that only in these conditions did one requester persist in making a second request after his first had been refused. Perhaps subjects in these conditions acquiesced to the critical zoo trip not because of pressure to reciprocate a concession, but because they were done into a session by a tenacious requester, or because they wanted to avoid the requester's perception of them as having a generally antisocial or unhelpful nature. So so it's not framing, but it's possible that it's just because I bugged you. I've worn you down.
You've bullied me.
You don't want to be perceived as
as I'm a mean person. I won't help. All right. So then, what'd they do with experiment 3?
Okay. So subjects. So the first is the rejection moderation condition. Okay. Identical to experiment 1. After hearing and rejecting an extreme request, a subject heard the requester make a smaller request to chaperone the group of delinquents on the 2R to the zoo. Okay?
Okay.
The usual thing. Here, there was no person 3 in this.
Okay.
It's much closer to experiment 1. Okay?
Okay.
The next is the smaller request only control, identical to experiment 1.
Just come up and say, would you go to the zoo?
The subject heard the requester make only the smaller request to chaperone the group of delinquents. Okay. And then the last one, to make sure that it's not just being worn down, is the equivalent request control. Subjects in this
What's
condition
that?
heard a requester initially request they perform as chaperones for a group of juvenile delinquents on a 2-hour trip to the city museum. After the subjects responded to this first request, the experimenter then requested. I guess I'll just read it. Sorry. After this, okay. Oh my God. Subjects in this condition heard a requester initially request that they perform as chaperones for a group of juvenile delinquents on a 2-hour trip to the city museum. After the subjects responded to the first request, the experimenter then requested that they chaperone a group of juvenile delinquents on a 2-hour trip to the zoo. So, in the regular rejection moderation condition that we've been doing, it's been large request, small request.
Right, and this is just small and
request
small.
only was just small request, and then this was small and small, right?
Small
so go to the museum,
small.
go to the zoo.
Oh,
So
was that it?
Yeah,
are those all the conditions?
So the idea
right.
is
I don't know what's going to happen.
So the theory is that there's a certain number of people who will just say yes for the small request control, right? The theory is if it's pestering.
Yeah, if it's just that I don't want to be seen as being bad. And when you ask me for another thing,
then I will say yes.
It's very similar as the first thing. I'll say yes to the second one just because, I said no to the first one. Now I'm feeling a little bad, and I'm feeling you think I'm a bad person. So when you make another request, very similar, I'll just say yes the second time.
So again, no subject in experiment 3 complied with the extreme request.
All right. Nobody said they'd do the 2-year commitment.
Okay. So the smaller request only control, the
when you just asked them the one question about going
was
to the zoo.
33%. So about the same.
Yeah, really similar, about the same as before.
Higher than 1. So.
Yeah, higher than 1, but not that different. All right.
The equivalent request control. Oh, I'll do the rejection moderation condition.
Wait a minute, that's the big.
Yeah, the same as we've done every time.
Okay.
54%.
All right, what is that?
Very similar to for
very
50%,
similar. 50, 51, 55. 54. Okay. And now
it was the equivalent request control.
Small. Okay.
That was 33%. The same as the small request only control. Well, I don't know.
Really?
It really deserves a
same
gasp of surprise.
A gasp of surprise. Well, to tell you the truth, I don't know that I've knew about Experiment 3. I've been writing about some of this stuff, but I didn't realize about Experiment 3. So that means
so hold on.
that it's not... Oh, there's another...
You can go ahead and say what you're going to say. But...
Well, I'm going to say, so it's not framing. It's not just the relative. And it's not just, I feel bad because I said no.
So...
This is very weird.
No, it's not really weird. So the equivalent request control had the exact same. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the people who agreed to perform the request in the equivalent request control.
Yeah.
Clearly, it's not a case that persistent requester induces compliance to a second request solely through the act of making a second request, right? Because otherwise it would be higher. Subjects were stoutly consistent in the nature of their responses to the 2 requests. So, the vast majority, so 22 of the 24 in that small group, they either said yes to both or no to both. So they were so the second request seemed to have no impact at all.
It's so interesting. It's interesting. It's almost like self-story versus relationship.
Well,
but I'm trying to figure this out.
General discussion then. Taken together, the findings of experiments 1, 2, and 3 seem to support the reciprocal concessions model. So
I don't know. I'm confused.
I don't know why you're confused.
Okay, so you asked me for something really big and pretty much unreasonable.
Mm-hmm.
And I say no. And then you come back and you ask me for something smaller, much smaller, and much more reasonable. And so, not everyone, but a much larger group of people say yes. Realize that most people still say no, or at least it's half, right? But if you ask me for something reasonable and I say no, and then you ask me for something else reasonable, I still say no.
Or you said yes to both.
What do you mean I said yes
Some
to
people
both?
said yes to the first one and yes to the second one.
Oh, did people say no to one and then say yes to the second one?
Only 2 people changed, alternated.
Oh, so you mean the people that said yes to the second one had already said yes to the first one?
Yeah.
But still not very many people.
Yeah, less than if you go big, small.
So why do you think that is? Why do you think big, small makes a difference rather than just small, small? Do you have a sense of that?
Experiments 2 and 3 demonstrated the importance of concession. Simply presenting a target person with a smaller request after he had rejected a larger one, or simply presenting a target person with a second request of equivalent size, does not increase agreement up to the second request. Only when the proposal of the second favor can be considered a concession on the part of the requester is compliance increased.
So it's not because I feel... Okay,
it's reciprocal concession.
See, yeah, it's not because I feel bad because I turned you down.
That's part of it, but it's
no. But another part is I feel like you've
yes
given in, or you've changed.
That's
changed
why it's
your
called
position.
The reciprocal concessions model.
Oh, this is so. Therefore, because you changed, I should consider changing too. So it's not just a matter of I said no and therefore I owe you. It's more a matter of I said no, and then you came back to me with something else.
Well, you did. You were like, oh, I did. You know, you said no. I do a favor. You know, do something small.
Right. Okay, that's very interesting, Guthrie. I did not realize that's a nuance that I had not realized before. So I guess always interesting to acknowledge one's ignorance on air. But so that's really interesting. And now we should talk about...
I bet you a lot of, all these papers, I bet you people misunderstand exactly what they say.
You mean like I just did?
No, because I think there's a lot of literature out there where people have written about it, but they just, they write it from the book and they didn't actually go and... Now, and this paper, honestly, this is a really, really... I mean, some of it's really, really hard, but this paper is a really straightforward one. Yeah,
relatively speaking.
I think it's...
All right. So let's... So I'm going to give you a situation, all right? So let's say that you're doing some work for a client and you're designing... you're doing some design work for a client. You're a consultant. And you want you're hoping, maybe this is a bad analogy. You're hoping that the client will agree to, implement your design. So this kind of tells us, doesn't it, what you might want to consider doing differently when you present that design?
I don't know. You tell me. You've presented a lot more designs than I have.
So it means if I just come to you and I say, okay, listen, we took all the data you gave us and from all the research we did, and here's some ideas of what, of a good solution for you, right? And I present to you what I think is the best solution because that's what you hired me to do. And I'm very good at what I do, and I've got a great solution to your design issue. But I only give you one. And you look at it and you go, maybe, right?
Sure.
I mean, compliance is going to be pretty small.
I guess so. Yeah. Yeah.
But if I come to you and I say, okay, maybe we shouldn't talk about this, because then people are going to, if they hire us to do consulting, they're going to say, I know what you're doing. But I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. So, but if I come to you and I say, given everything you've told me here, what you really should do, and this is actually often true, what you really should do is start all over, right? You're designing the wrong thing. You really need to rethink this whole thing. You should scrap the whole desktop thing and design, do a brand new thing for mobile, or whatever it is I'm going to suggest to them. And it's huge. It's like this big, big thing I'm asking them to do. And typically they're going to say no, because it's too big. It's too much. But if I then came back and said, okay, how about this? How about if we make these changes over here? They are more likely to agree to that than if I just came to them and said, how about you make these changes over here? And it's because I was willing to negotiate my big design idea down to a few little smaller changes. But they're more likely to go with my few smaller changes in that instance than if I lead with the few smaller changes. I think a lot of times, and maybe this is just my personality, but I think this has happened to other people. A lot of times as consultants, as designers, whether we're outside consultants or we're designers on the design team, we have an idea, a big idea. And we just automatically say, they'll never go for that. And so we don't present it. We just don't even talk about it, because we say, that's too big of a change. I know they're not going to go for it. I'm not even going to bring it up, because it'll just make them upset that I even came up with that idea. And therefore, I'm just going to go to them with the 5 little changes they should make, because they're little and they'll go for it. And then we're surprised and we're upset when they won't even make the 5 little changes. We would have been better off telling them the big radical change, and when they say no, then we do the concession and we come back with the 5 little ones. Right?
Probably. Yeah. You gotta. Yeah. Yeah.
Because you have to show that you were willing to concede something. You have to show that you were willing to change what you're asking for. And then when you show that, then they feel somehow. And so this isn't really coming from indebtedness. It's almost coming from...
So I say in my my blog post.
Your write-up of this, yeah. What do you say?
Is that... is that it's driven through empathy and compassion. So the sentence I have is, ironically, compliance is driven best through empathy and compassion.
What do you mean by that?
So, you get people to comply not by but I mean empathy and compassion because the basic the framework of it is, I ask you for something, you say no. I say, oh, I really, that's fine that you say no. How about like the smaller thing, right? Like, I'm empathizing with your situation, and instead of taking a hard line, right, I take a softer line. I'm compassionate and empathetic. And then you, seeing that I've taken a softer line, also are like, that's so nice that you take compassion. I want to help you out.
That's so nice that you were willing to do that.
So compliance is actually driven by empathy and compassion. I find that interesting. Much in the way that cooperation is driven by punishment.
Well, that's another topic for another podcast episode.
But that's...
we did. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's interesting, I think it's that it seems to be like that the effect of one thing comes from the like opposite that you would expect.
Do you think any of it comes from
Like or that like donation comes from not from altruism but from selfishness?
I wasn't going to ask that, but do you
Yeah,
think
for
that's
sure.
true? What do you mean by that?
You know, it's
I'm going to donate because then I'll be able
well
to get something?
the
Because it makes me
the
feel
thought
good.
is the thought is that you like you donate because it makes other people it makes then you could say you're a good person and other people think you're a good person and look how good of a person I am.
Well, I was just going to ask you if you thought, when I'm thinking about
Yeah.
self-story, right? Like, you made a big request and that wasn't reasonable. I said no. Then you changed it because you realized it was too big and you're empathetic, and so you changed it to a smaller one. And I'm the kind of person, right? I mean, and I think most of this, of course, I'm going to think is happening unconsciously, but I'm the kind of person that's fair and reasonable. And if I'm the kind of person that, if you're willing to change what you asked for, I'm willing to change it too, because that's kind of who I am. I guess I'm not sure whether it's a mirroring of perceived empathy or whether it's a self-story about being fair and reasonable. I mean, and maybe we'll never know, and maybe it's
That's
both,
yeah.
maybe
So
it's
all
none.
I was saying is, oftentimes what society I think says drives, or like when you see messages of stuff like how do you get people to comply? Will you be really strict because it's all about forcing people to your will? Or how do you get people to donate? Oh, you got to be nice, like donate, be a good person, right? But I think oftentimes the true human motivation is actually the inverse of what society thinks is which I think is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So this means that I better watch out. You're going to be asking me for large things.
I don't
Yeah, I'm
anything.
suspicious now. You're going to ask me for 2 months off to go to Thailand.
I don't need anything. I'm good.
Well, Guthrie, this is interesting, and I'm really glad. Like I said, I thought I knew. See, I thought I knew about concession, and now I learned something new.
Yeah,
about concession.
Where'd you get? Like, I'm not saying you did it, but like, where'd you like learn about this stuff?
About concession,
or like
okay, I'm looking. I'm
concession, and then like the jam study. Because like you didn't even know about the second half of that one either.
You're making me sound bad.
You still know way more than most people.
Well, I mean, I've read Cialdini's book, The Psychology of Influence, which is where I read about the concession study. Now, and I'm actually turning around here while we're talking. I'm turning around and looking at my bookshelf, trying to find the book. Because now you have me very curious about whether how far these studies all happened, one right after another, right?
I mean, it was published in. It was published in the same paper. It's all in the same research paper.
Oh, did you hear that? That was me dropping a book. Okay, I have Robert Cialdini's The Psychology of Persuasion, and it's called Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion. My copy is so old that it's turning yellow. 1984 is when it was initially published, and then republished in much, much later. But I believe, I'm going to look this up here, I believe that's where I first, reciprocal reciprocal concessions on page 36 of Cialdini's book. Okay. So I'm just kind of he talks about it. I'm gonna go back and read this chapter. And I'm assuming that this may be an incorrect memory, but I'm assuming that's where I, read about it was I was reading his book. But it's possible that I heard about it somewhere else. And in terms of Sheena Iyengar, oh my goodness, I mean I have her book too, The Art of Choosing, which she obviously talks about the jam study. But I'm pretty sure that I first read about the jam study from much earlier when she was a graduate student and had kind of first published that just before she wrote her book. But yeah, I mean, maybe I am guilty of not reading these papers.
Well, I don't blame you at all. Sure. They're long and they're complicated, and I certainly don't. Someone who's trying to make an accessible book to the general public to explain these complicated things, I do not blame them in the slightest if they kind of chopped what I just did, which took an hour. To
explain after you had already written about this series of studies,
that you just kind of drop
another
2
hour
and 3
after you
and you
had
make
already
your point
read it,
and you
took
move
another
on.
hour.
So,
which is, I guess, why you're going back and. Although I pride myself on carefully reading research, so it bothers me a little bit. You're messing with my self-story. No, but that's really interesting. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to read what Cialdini says about it in his book. I'm going to go back and maybe read what Sheena Iyengar says about the jam study. But I really do appreciate your taking the time to read these studies and to analyze them in this depth and to talk to us about them. Because as you said, it's sometimes not easy to really parse all the research out. And okay, so on the one hand, one could say, well, why is it necessary, right? All you need to know is that if you want people to do something, ask them for something big first. And then when they say no, ask them for something little. But that's probably, that I usually try and stay on the practical level. But I like I think it's interesting, the more nuanced level about, why that might be working and some of the follow-up experiments that, tease out what really might be at work. And, that's what a good researcher is going to do, right? Is say, well, it could be such and such, so let's do another experiment to test that out. So interesting. And so anybody out there who's trying to get other people to agree to whatever it is you'd like them to agree, you might want to think about how to use this to do it. And Guthrie, is that being too manipulative, do you think? Yeah, I don't think it is either. I think it's just how to position your ideas so that other people will comply and accept. I don't think that's being too manipulative either, but people could argue with us on it. Guthrie, I think we've used up all our time. Thanks for doing this. And we are going to, what we'll do, because you did write this. Have you done the video and the blog post on this topic yet? No. Okay. So what we'll do is after, we'll obviously do this podcast, but when you do publish that, I will amend the blog post and point to it after the fact.
Okay.
Which we can do.
I'll talk to you later.
Thanks, Guthrie.
Bye.
Bye.